Dankie collega's. Al die ander mense wat ingeskakel het, sê vir ons bietjie, is julle Engels of Afrikaans? Okay. Meeste mense klink vir my as Afrikaans. Ons gee dit nog so 'n minuut. Okay, kom nog 'n paar mense in. Afrikaanse ouers met Engelse kinders. Dit lyk vir my dit is deesdae die status quo, nee, Reinet?
Ja, nee, verseker. Dis ja, interessant wanneer jou kinders kies om Engels te praat.
Dit maak sin, ongelukkig. Okay, ek dink ons kan nie te lank wag voor ons afskop nie. Ek dink ons kan maar begin. Ena, my kollega is ook besig om hierdie na Facebook toe te stream, so julle kan vir julle pelle ook laat weet, hulle kan daar aanskakel as hulle nie die link gekry het of hier kan inskakel nie. Baie welkom by vandag se webinar. Dit is lekker om met Reinet en met Deidre weer te gesels oor Tippie leer klanke, Tippie learns sounds. Die boeke kom natuurlik eers volgende jaar uit, maar ons wil hê julle moet nou al kennis maak hiermee dat julle dit vooraf kan bestel en solank kan regmaak vir die nuwe jaar. Ja, dit is 'n baie lekker nuwe toevoeging tot ons reeks. Ek gaan nie vreeslik baie lank self gesels nie. Ek wil graag die vloer aan hulle oorgee. En onthou as julle enige vrae het, tik dit gerus hier in die chatbox in. Daar's 'n hele paar van my kollegas wat reg sit om te antwoord. Ons is ons is daar om te help. Maar Reinet en Deidre, oor na julle.
Baie dankie.
Dankie, jong. Good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon, we're specifically going to chat about Tippie learns sounds. And Deirdre is an occupational therapist, and Deirdre is going to talk to us about the technical aspects and what makes Tippie learns sounds different to most other phonics-based approaches. As you know, Tippie always does things differently. Deirdre, wil jy nie net gou-gou jou screen share afhaal dat ek net vir die mense kan wys hoe lyk ons proewe? Nee.
Nou moet ek nou eers kyk, stop share. There we go. Dis hy.
Okay. So kom ons kyk of julle my daar groot kan sien. We've received our printer's proofs to go through them last time, and this super big pack is Tippie learns sounds. There's 18 A4 color pages in a book. Deirdre is going to show you the content on the inside, but these 26 beautifully colorful A4 books offers great value for money. And as Nadine said, it is a January publication, but we are already going to print on Monday, the 24th of October. So we are hoping that they will be on the shelves in December, and for any child going to grade R next year, they will be wonderful Christmas gifts. But that's it from my side. Deirdre is going to tell you what is the method to our madness with Tippie learn sounds en dan natuurlijk ook Tippie leer klanke. Baie belangrik, net om van kennis te neem, is hierdie reeks is oorgeskryf in Afrikaans, and it was rewritten in English. Tippie does not do mere translations because each language has its own language system. En dit is iets wat regtig sommer vir Tippie heeltemal anders maak. Deirdre, ons luister lekker na jou.
Thank you, Renette. Just a disclaimer in the beginning, my home language is Afrikaans, so I'm fluent in English, but sometimes it's more like a foreign language to me because if I get really excited, I turn back to Afrikaans. So if you lose me or I'm unclear, just stop and say, just repeat that. I would do it in a heartbeat. And I'll speak mostly in English, but I might here and there just go back to Afrikaans as it is a more comfortable language for me. I think I was very excited to be involved in this project because Tippie Learn Sounds. I think what makes it great is that it's not only a one-dimensional learning tool. We looked at so many aspects that's involved in a child's development to support this process or process towards reading with independence. I always tell the parents that I see that the foundation phase is so important. Your child learns so many skills, and one of the big things that they actually need to learn is how to read. And then after the foundation phase, when they reach grade 4, they use reading to actually be able to learn something. So it's such an important building block in a child's academic future, the ability to read well. So I'm involved in the Tippie Learn Sounds project from an occupational therapy point of view. And as an occupational therapist, we believe that development is a process and that each step in the developmental process sort of forms the building block for the things that follow onto it. And I always like to use this image of a house. So for a house to be strong, it needs a solid foundation. And all the things that your child or the children in your class learn from the time that they are a baby until they're actually school ready is the building blocks or the foundation of this child's future academic learning. And in the same way that a child needs to sit before they can crawl, before they can stand, before they can run, there's certain building blocks that needs to be present in a child's developmental sequence so that they, when they, wat is skoolpligtig in Afrikaans, when they need to go to school, if all of those building blocks are in place, we believe that they will be ready to learn, they will be ready for school. And I think if you just look at this house, I can give an hour lecture on each of these parts, but I think the thing that I want to convey is that your sensory systems is the way that your brain receives information from the environment and it uses that information to learn. For instance, vision. If you're able to see the word and there's other skills that's also involved there, you will be able to read. If you can't see properly, that will affect that process. The next part of development is your gross motor development. That's all the big muscle movements that your body needs to make, but I'm not going to go into that. And on that block, if you've got good gross motor skills, your fine motor skills are usually also well developed, and you need that to be able to hold a pencil to actually write down what word you've got in front of you or the sentence that you're reading, or you need to copy it down. And the block in the yellow at the top, we talk about your auditory and visual perception, and that's a very important part of your ability to be able to read with insight, by lack of a better word. And if all of those developmental milestones or blocks are in place and forms a solid foundation, the roof of the house is your scholastic abilities, the ability to read, to spell, to do maths, to be independent in your activities of daily living, and we call those things occupational performance. And the reason I'm showing you this is that this is a developmental framework. And what I like about the way that Tippie develops the reading and even the sounds and the maths curriculum is in a synthetic reading way that how I'm going to explain this in Afrikaans. So it's a developmental approach that you need certain skills. You need to, for instance, know your phonics to be able to make words. If you can make words, you can put it in a sentence. The sentence has meaning, and you're able to give a response or an answer. So that's a whole developmental process. And this is where, when we looked at the Tippie Learn Sounds project, we made sure that it's scientifically solid, that we take a lot of incidental learning opportunities to build it into this program, or this phonics. Daar's my Engelse woord nou op, hierdie reeks van klanke. So I think to make it easy, I should just maybe explain to you that what the synthetic reading method is when we look at it's the way that we take a word and we break it into their smallest parts. There's the foneme, fonologiese bewustheid, so 'n bewustheid van hoe die woordjie klink en hoe ons hulle kan bymekaar sit om 'n woordjie te maak, en hoe ons dit weer kan uitmekaar uittrek en op 'n ander manier gebruik om op 'n nuwe woordjie of klankie uit te kom. So I'll read it for you in English just to make it a little bit easier. I'll just need to move this out of my sight. Okay, so synthetic phonics is a method of teaching where words are broken up into the smallest units of sounds, and that we call phonemes, and in Afrikaans is foneme. Dis my makliker woord om te sê. So children learn to make these connections when letters, they hear what it sounds like and they see what it looks like, and how we can put them together to be able to make a word and spell correctly, or to break up the words or decode them, to be able to blend them in a different way. Not too long ago, or even in some schools, the reading method was one that we called an analytical way of reading. So we actually taught the children to look at a word and remember that word. I don't know if you've come across this. They would draw a box around the word and say, your brain will take a picture of this word and will remember it. And if you remember enough words, you'll be able to read. But scientifically, if you look at it from a developmental perspective, there's a better way of doing it. There's lots of research that actually shows that if you use this analytical method to read, you need to remember at least 3,000 words to be able to read 95% of written text. Now, if you're working in a class, or that is a huge task for a child of 6 years old to master. I mean, even for me, it's a tall order. So that's why I think a lot of the reading problems we face now is because of this method that is not really developmentally solid. Where if you look at the English language, there's 44 phonemes, of 44 foneme, of klank, letterklanke. And if you know all of those, the 44, you will be able to synthesize and decode words in such a way that you'll be able to decipher any word that you are presented with. And what I've seen with my own daughter, which by the way does have a specific learning difficulties, but more with writing, the amazing thing is she had the opportunity to learn to read with Tippie. I think that was your first books that came out, where my oldest boys were more, I remember how we had to learn this word partytjie, and they just couldn't remember it. And in the end, I said, just look at the back of the word. If you see that one, it's partytjie. But that's not reading, that's just remembering. And I can see the difference between what she's been able to do, my little girl who actually learned to read with Tippie, is she will she's now in grade 5, she will read the most difficult English text, but because she's got a good phonological awareness, by phonologiese bewustheid, she's able to decipher any word, and she enjoys reading. So that's why I specifically like the way that we've approached this Tippie Learns to Read, or Tippie Learn Sounds project. And I think I'll explain it to you just in a different way. Remember, I showed you the house and I talked about what synthetic learning or reading is about. But what we've done is we've taken all the sounds, and it's almost like a whole pile of Legos. If you just put it in front of the child, it doesn't make sense. But what we've done is we went and we looked at everything a child needs to learn their sounds, with the long goal, or the end being able to learn to read. So that's our end game. So if we take the sounds, and for instance, the blue blocks would be what the sound sounds like, the letter sound. The red would be what it looks like. The green might be the language involved with that letter sound. And the yellow might be the way that you form letters. So now we're categorizing it, and then we've built it into a whole program. So each sound has its own book, and we've tried to incorporate as many of these important skills that supports reading into this whole process. So what I then would like to check. So now we've got the letter. I know what it looks like. I know I can name 10 words that starts with this sound. I can write it. Then I can use those and put it into context. I can form words, and then I can maybe form sentences, short sentences, making it longer, and then only all those grammatical rules and things about English that is quite difficult for me as an Afrikaans person comes into play. But this is the basics. So as soon as you've got that building blocks, you can actually put it into context. Now I can do different things with these sounds. I can maybe start writing a story, or I can change the story. I use the same words, but I change it. So now I can work with the phonics and the sounds. And that's the building blocks of actually being able to read. And that's why I'm so excited about this phonics, this Tippie sounds approach, because I really believe that we've put in a lot of effort to make sure that all the hidden outcomes, all the important enablers to be able to read are put into place. So it's I think easier to maybe just as a bit of background. Renette has shown you that big pile of books, and we're very excited about it. It's a lot of information, but we've structured it in a specific way. And I thought I would go through the books and just maybe give you an idea of what it entails. But I think the most important things that we've tried to incorporate is that it needs to be fun, because a child learns when they have fun. It's something that you would need to do with your class or with your child if you're a homeschool mom, to be able to really get the full benefit of the series. And then we've added a lot of things in there. For instance, to work structured. When we read from left to right, top to bottom. So everything we did in terms of letter formation, reading, scanning, with some of the perceptual activities is in this structured way. And we've added on each page a little bit of a information section where you can actually go and read about it. Things that are important, like the pencil grip, also the letter formation, things that are very important, but I'll talk about it a little bit later. And then I think Renette said that for any grade R child, this would be a wonderful Christmas present. But I think it's intended for use for children that are learning or exposed to letter sounds. For some children, it might be grade R. For some children, it might only be in grade 1, or it might be you've got an English class and you're going to use it in their second language. So what we also prefer or recommend is that you use, those little thick pencils that you start with. Those are the ideal ones to use with this book, but obviously not exposing children to thin pencils, gray pencils, when they are not developmentally ready to do so. But I'll explain while we go through. So I thought I'll do Tippie, because Tippie the elephant, it's a good book just to show you what it's about. And then you'll see in each book there is an association to the letter. So in the book T, we did train and tomato and Tippie and tongue. And the reason why we chose not to use just one specific association is that children, for instance, I would ask a little boy to spell the word bat, and then he would say to me, Benny, Benny, Annie, tomato. But that's not a word. They need to know that it's b-a-t. So we don't want them to form such a strong association with a sound that they sort of always link it to the same, because then it becomes Annie apple, and Annie apple is not an a in the, if you sound it out, it becomes difficult to blend. So we stay away from that. And you'll also see on the right-hand side, every book has a vocabulary page. Because the language, I think a lot of the problems children struggle with these days is also because of poor language skills, poor vocabulary. I must admit that a while back, I asked my child to give me I don't even know what you call it in English, but in Afrikaans it's a bakplaat. So you use that to put in your oven. And he had no clue what I was talking about. He's 21. So even in my home, where I really go through a lot of effort to make sure that language is, we talk about different things and we name everything we see, but their language, or they will just say the English or the Afrikaans word. Although I think English kids are less likely to do that, but the Afrikaans kids mix it, terribly. And for instance, on the vocabulary page at the bottom, we would say, go into your kitchen and find 3 things with te, or whatever this instruction is, to sort of build the bridge between what's happening on the page and also on a kind of static or a level where you actually do something with your hand. And then we've also with each book, paid a lot of attention to the correct letter formation. For instance, you'll see on the left, we did Tippie, and Tippie walks on the road to the stop street and stop sign, and where the starting points are and where the end points are. And we use this structure throughout. I know there's a lot of teachers, especially, or parents, that ask me, but why is it important to actually write the letter correctly? And I think the important thing to remember is if you form a word or a letter correctly, it becomes a pattern. And then you have to spend less time thinking about how to write the letter. It becomes automatic. And it also reduces the risk of reversals. For instance, with a B and a D, you actually start both those in totally different places. But once it's formed, it sort of looks similar, although they've got tummies that faces different ways. But with the B, you start first the bat and then the ball. That's the wrong way around for you. And around the dam goes the man. So it's 2 totally different ways of forming these letters. And that's one of the big reasons why children are inclined to reverse letters. If you go back and you look at the way that they actually form it, you realize that that's the problem, or that's where the problem lies. So we've got lots of letter formation, shows exactly what to do. And then one of the big skills that you need to be able to read is what we call visual perceptual skills. And one of those skills is the ability to see that a word or a letter stays the same, even though it's bigger or smaller, or in a word, or written in a different font. So a lot of our activities also has that in mind. So visual form constancy and visual figure ground is the ability to know what you see here as a T, or if it's the wrong way around, that it looks like a T, but it's not a T because it's not orientated correctly. And on this side where you see Tippie and the trolley, so we use a lot of vocabulary with the T sound, and we ask the children, find all the pictures that starts with a T, or look at the words, find all the words that has a T in them. In the beginning, they actually just look at the sound, or at the letter. But later on, they're actually able to read those words. It's high frequency words, easy to decode or synthesize, and to actually read what it says. What we've also tried to do is that we try to do it in different ways. It's totally a different skill to be able to just find a picture that starts with a T than finding a T in a word or finding T in a sentence. And what we also encourage there is to scan from left to right, work systematically, because that's the way we read, that's the way we write. So in every page, we've tried to include some of that. And then also to make it fun, help Tippie to find the trophy. And then we've also added in the pattern that actually helps us to form these letters correctly. I don't know what you call this in, I think it's a monkey swing in English, apiswaai, where they actually have to practice that pattern there. And the continuous forming of that pattern is the continuous motion that you need to write. So it's such an important part of learning to write, learning to work from left to right, which is important for reading, your eye-hand coordination. So there's a lot of hidden skills that we've included, but around the sound of the book. So there's 26 books, and every book has their own sound. And here, what we've tried to do is still working on those skills where the child needs to look at the picture, match the picture to the letter or the grapheme, what it looks like. And we've done the auditory skills as well, where we look at the picture and say, what sound do you hear in the beginning of the word? What sound do you hear at the end of the word? And that's a very important skill, especially in grade R, because if you're able to isolate, discriminate those sounds, it means that you'll be able to, for instance, if I've got the word bat, and I say, let's kick the B out, and we put a curly K in the front, the K sound. What word do you hear then? And then they will say cat, because they can blend those sounds they hear into a new word. With the visual auditory discrimination, we usually first work on the beginning sounds, then the end sounds, because those are easier to hear, and then we go to the middle sound. So especially all our vowel books has a lot of what do you hear in the middle of the word to really develop those auditory skills. Then on the next page, you'll see that there is arrows or lines with arrows. So we've also tried to include some eye movement exercises, especially for fluent reading. That's sometimes something that is a problem, but we've added in some visual memory exercises. So the kids that I've actually used this on really enjoyed it, because they needed to look and say what they see, following with their eyes, and then they needed to remember which pictures they saw, and then match that with the letter or the sound. And you'll see it remains in a process where we try to work in a structured way. We're trying to teach them to scan, always from the top to the bottom. And I know there's, especially some dads always ask me, but why is it important? Especially in the foundation phase, does it make a difference? But everything you learn in the foundation phase, you're going to use later. And for me, what I often see is children that write exams, but they'll do one question here, one question there. They won't go back to see, did I complete everything? So they get marks that are much less than they could actually have received, because they were just not working in a structured way. So that's oversimplification, but we've really tried to include those in the process as well. And then we also thought about some higher order activities where we actually asked the children to look at the pictures. And this is where the listening skills comes in. Which of those pictures does not start with a T? So you'll see it becomes progressively more difficult as we go through the book, and with specific sounds or specific skills or tasks that we want them to do in order. And there's a lot of figure ground, identifying the letters, all the T's, find all the T's, maybe capital letters or small letters. But I know there's often teachers that tell me, but we only use the teacher's pet font. Why are we using different fonts here? And the thing is, a child's form constancy is only developed if they can make the association that any T remains a T despite the letter font that you use or the size of the letter. Even if it's bold or not bold, it still remains a T. And they're not only going to read books with teacher's pet font, they are going to read different books with different fonts. I'm going to come back to this auditory perception and cutting skills activity. I'll show you on the last page. And then we've come to the point where we now put the T into a word, and it's usually it's complemented with a picture so they can figure out what the word says, and they can gain some confidence in this. Oh, I know what this word is. I know this sound, and still practicing it. And then some fun activities also for fine motor skills and auditory perception. Find all the pictures that start with the T, tippie, truck, tent. What do we have here? Torch and a toothbrush, and they can color those in. And then at this part, I just want to stop for a moment. You will see that we didn't include a lot of writing without guides or lines to work on in this series, because a child in their foundation or in the grade R year, the physical things that they do, the refinement of fine motor skills, the perceptual skills, the auditory skills, the visual skills are much more important than the writing part. There will be a lot of attention will be paid to those things in grade 1. That's just how they develop, and it's developmentally appropriate. But we did think we want to give them some exposure to independent writing. But what we've done is that we've put it into boxes to guide the child in the sense or the perceptual skills where you don't, the P and the O is never the same size, because P has a tail going down by gebruik aan 'n ander woord, and O is only in one line if you write in lines. So we need to sort of show them the orientation, but it's too difficult to expect them to do it by themselves. You will get kids who will be able to do it, but other children will struggle. So in each book, there's also a section where they have to write it, and the spatial perception, will come into play so that we can guide them to show them some are short, some are tall, some have a tail that goes down. But every teacher has their own way of teaching it. And then we've added a lot of fine motor activities into it. And also, I didn't mention it before, for instance, with the T, in Afrikaans, we would give the instruction, find it, ek gaan dit nou in Afrikaans sê, vind 'n takkie, te vir takkie, en trek die te na. Of gaan soek doppies en bou die te met die doppietjies, of wat ook al die klankie is. So there's a lot of concrete or actually practical ways of doing this. Practically, not only on paper, because they still learn when in a concrete way. So we need to include that. And then what we've done, I just want to go one back. This is too fast for me. What we've done, in each book, there will be a fine motor activity or activities where you need to do something to develop the fine motor skills as well. With the T, we said, okay, find toilet paper and roll it into small balls and paste it on the T. Then you can feel what it feels like. You practice your fine motor skills that you need for your pencil. So there's a lot of hidden outcomes that we've also included in the Tippie Learn Sounds series, because sounds is not only what they look like or what they sound like. We need to look at all the different aspects. And then if you remember, I'm just going to show you this page, what we've done at the end of the book. We've also added a cutting skills activity, and you'll see all the cutting activities there's some with circles where you need to cut circles. There's some with irregular lines, or these are just straight lines because it's easier to cut. So cutting is also a very nice way of preparing the hand for pencil grip, because the fingers you use to hold your scissors is also the fingers you actually use when you're writing. So all of that was also built into this book. And what we've asked here, I just want to see if I've got it correctly. You needed to paste, decide if the picture begins with a T or ends with a T. Remember that auditory perception that we've spoken about. So let's see Teddy. So the child says the word T, and they know where to paste it. So all the pictures with a T sound in the beginning sound T, will be in one section, and in the end, for instance, spot would be in another section. So there's a lot of, actually, we talk about executive functioning skills, where the child really has to think and work with the sound. And for each sound of the alphabet, there is a book, except there's somewhere like the Q and what's the other ones, the X and the Z, where it becomes difficult to have a whole book with, there isn't enough vocabulary in English to make it a whole book. But what we've done, we ended the book, or the series, with 3 separate books, which I'll tell you a little bit later. Sounds 1, Sounds 2, and Tippie Learns to Read, which is like the first, after they've done all the sounds, they would be able to read that easy stories. And if a child's able to do that by the end of grade art, would actually be great for preparation for grade 1. The vowels, we did a little bit differently. Same concepts, but we also focused a lot on the middle sounds of what you hear in the middle, because most of our high frequency words, these vowels are used in, so it makes it a little bit easier. And we've also included some activities where the children can blend the words. For instance, let me just see if I can find you an example. I didn't want to do all these separately. I'll pause it as soon as I see an example. So the phonics books looks slightly different than the consonants, but it's the same principle or kind of activities out there. That was the one I used. Pause. Okay. Oh no, that's going to go too fast. This is the example of Tippie Learn Sounds, where we've actually created activities where the children need to use all the letters that they've learned, games to play, some decoding, some more difficult words. So there's lots of fun. So there's 2 books just with sort of a culmination of all the skills that we've created to sort of end off your book series, or your daar ontgaan my Afrikaans my nou, maar julle weet wat ek bedoel. So just to sort of consolidate what we've done, I'm just going to go out, otherwise it's going to carry on. an overview of what we have at the moment is we've got this, books in Tippie Learn Sounds, Tippie Leer Klanke. So it's easy enough that you can use it for your second language or your first language children, depending on their needs. And then for each sound, there's a separate book with those activities. That's more or less in each book the structure that you will see. It's difficult to say in which order to use them because there's a different way or approach of doing it. So you need to decide what you do in your grade or in your school. But what we do recommend is that you do all the sounds or all the different sound books before you do Tippie Sounds 1 or 2 or the reading book. So those should be at the end. And then we also recommend that a teacher or a parent should just not give the book to the child and the child then does his own thing, because there's so many valuable things that you can actually instill in the child. And in each page, we've indicated what you should say, how you should say it, what some extra advice. And if you do those things, you're going to get so much more out of this book than just learning the letter T or the letter sound. Things like pencil grip, yes, it's important. The correct writing utensils. There's lots of little things, also multi-sensory ways of doing it. We also, in the initial part where we sort of explain what it's all about, we recommend that you do 2 or 3 activities, but in order from page 1 to page 16, but not more than 3 activities on a day, and to really make it fun for the children. What I experience with the children I work with, sometimes there isn't an issue. They struggle to read, but there isn't an issue, but the confidence is the problem. Or they can't spell, but if you test them and you just make a little bit of a joke or fun, then they can do it because they get so stressed. And unfortunately, those things start because we sometimes expose them to learning things that they're not ready to actually master at that age. So for us, it's important that we look at the children holistically. We work multisensory. We base this whole series on research and the way children learn from a developmental framework, which is, the way I live and breathe, with some insight from a remedial point of view and lots of experience in terms of how children learn and what they need to be able to do at different stages. Renette, I'm just wondering if I forgot something now.
No, thank you so much, Deirdre. I think just to add on to that, just to reiterate again that Tippie Leer Klanke and Tippie Learn Sounds are similar, but yet different. So for Tippie Learn Sounds, you've mentioned that there's 44 phonemes in the English language. From my experience, young children cannot master 44 phonemes before they start learning to read. So Tippie Learn Sounds fits in beautifully with the rest of the Tippie leveled readers. Tippie Learn Sounds focus on the 26 alphabet letter sounds together with CVC words, consonant, vowels, consonant words. And the entire time we've created Tippie Learn Sounds so that children who knows their letter sounds incidentally start putting sounds together to start reading. And I think that is the end goal, is that at the end of Tippie Learn Sounds, children will be able to move on to the level 1 Tippie readers that uses the 26 alphabet letters together with high frequency sight words. And then in each level, after level 1, in every book, a new phoneme is introduced. So we're starting off with what is developmentally appropriate for that age group. rather than most other approaches where kids learn 44 sounds and then only start to read. So Tippie programs for success. Tippie does things differently, and Deirdre and I have spent hours, weeks, and months back and forth on both Tippie Leerklanke and Tippie Learn Sounds to finally have a very, very unique, synthetic language approach that is eclectic, holistic, multisensorial, and where every single thing that's in the book serves a purpose that targets specific outcomes, either through incidental learning, including hidden curriculum skills, but also looking at those prerequisite skills for learning that Deirdre mentioned, the figure ground, the constancy, all of those things are included in this series. Is there a right or a wrong? Is there a specific way to teach young children letter sounds? Is there an international approach that is best? The short answer is no. There's no prescribed order in which children should learn letter sounds. There's personal preference. I know one of the methods starts with at, and n. And why do we then have 23 individual sound books? Because you can choose in whatever order you want kids to learn their letter sounds. The books are presented in a beautiful sleeve, but you can choose to start at book W. I know some of the programs does W and then V, and but you have the freedom, and the series have been written so that you can use it in the specific way that you would like to. As Deirdre mentioned, Sounds 1, Sounds 2, and I Begin to Read is the last part of the series, and that is just to now mix up all the sounds that the child have learned. We've included some unique South African vocabulary, kudu, but then also vocabulary is extremely important, and there's lots of new vocabulary that kids will learn. Kiwi fruit, kangaroo. So there's method to our madness. And I think that, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. Deirdre and I can, I think, recite the books at night in our nightmares. It's been 52 individual books, but we're super proud of it, and we hope that you are going to enjoy learning letter sounds with our favorite elephant.
There we go.
Nadine, I don't know if
Nadine,
there's
are you
any
back?
questions. As julle moeilike vrae wil vra vir Deirdre.
Nee, ek vra gerus in Afrikaans as julle wil, hoor.
Ja, maar julle, ek is hier. Ek het net vir 'n oomblik nie gefokus nie, maar ek wonder sommer of iemand 'n vraag het. Julle kan dit daar in die chatbox sit, of julle kan sommer net vraag vra. Is daar enig iemand wat ietsie wil weet? Dalk van 'n pre-order, net kan jy vir ons dalk iets sê? Waar hulle dit kan bestel, hulle kan daar by julle ook bestel, né?
Hulle kan direk by ons ook bestel. Jy kan op Tippie se Facebook blad gaan kyk. Daar is my my selfoonnommer, jy kan my WhatsApp, my e-posadres, ons kan vir jou kwotasie stuur. Ek dink nogal wat redelik belangrik is om net te noem, is dat Tippie leerklanke and Tippie learn sounds are activity books. You would need a set of books for each child in your class. Ons LAPA uitgewers Penguin het die Tippie leerklanke, Tippie learn sounds spot goedkoop gemaak. Dit is R400 vir die hele stel. En jou skool kan ook 15% afslag kry op alle skoolbestellings as jy vir my 'n e-pos stuur of jy kan vir Little Books kontak. Daar's LAPA agente reg oor Suid-Afrika. Maar jy kan nie die boeke fotostateer nie. Daar's kopiereg op en ons dit darm ook al bietjie geleer. Ek beloof vir jou boeke gaan nie mooi fotostateer nie. Ek sien daar's 'n vraag, Nadine.
Daar is inderdaad 'n vraag, ek sal gou vir jou lees. Het Tippie iets wat spesifiek kan help met skryf om van blanke papier na gewone lyntjies te vorder en dan van woorde na sinne?
Jong, daar is 'n groot verskeidenheid leermateriaal op Curious Readers. Agter in die Tippie boekies is daar ook by die aktiwiteite waar ons spesifiek die skriflyntjies ingesit het, want kinders skryf eers tussen die lyntjies met die visuele struktuur voordat hulle uiteindelik oorbeweeg van na net op 'n lyntjie skryf. In terme Deidre, hy kan nie help, maar in terme van 'n graad laat graad R, begin graad 1, graad 2 kind, is ons verwagtinge nog nie dat hulle reguit skryf op 'n blank vel papier nie. Dis nie 'n realistiese ontwikkelingsuitkomstes nie. So daar sal altyd 'n gidslyn wees wat ten minste as visuele struktuur dien.
Ja, ek dink dit hang nou af hoe oud of jou kindertjies nou graad R of graad 1 is, maar in graad R is hy, as jy vir hulle kan help met die korrekte klankvorming, gaan jy baie, gaan hulle op die langtermyn baie meer daarby baat, want hulle gaan in graad 1 soveel meer, dit word spesifiek in die kurrikulum ingebou. So ek sou eerder fokus in graad R as jy graad R juffrou is of 'n mamma is. Help jou kind, al skryf hy dit in sand, al skryf hy dit in skeerroom teen 'n spieël. Daai klankvorming is baie belangriker as wat hy dit fisies met 'n pen nou op 'n lyn op 'n papier skryf. In graad R spesifiek en selfs vir 'n beginner graad 1, daar's altyd mammas wat my vra, maar my kind wil nie skryf nie. Dan sê ek, wat moet julle doen? Ons moet klankwoorde spelling oefen. Dan sê ek, skeerroom teen die venster, oefen dit daar. En hulle lê dit net soveel makliker vas, want is lekker en hulle leer tog iets, al is dit nou nie op papier nie. Die skryf op die lyne, dink ek, moet 'n mens versigtig wees om te vinnig te inkorporeer, maar in graad 1 is dit mos nou heeltemal 'n ander situasie, maar jy is welkom om vir my en Lenet 'n e-posie te stuur of so as jy meer raad nodig het of spesifieke vragies het, want ek dink ons antwoord nou, ons weet nie regtig watter graad jou kinders is nie. Hier's nog 'n vraagie, Snack?
Nee, Tarina sê dis lekker om te weet hulle kan nou in graad R al met Tippie begin, maar Tarina, jy moet ook onthou daar is al vir die Tippie leer my leesreeks is daar ook in graad of daar is al graad R daar ook al beskikbaar, so jy het 'n magdom vol goed om van te kies. Daar's ook 'n leer my doen wat vir die heel kleintjies begin. So ek dink jy hoef nie net by die klanke te begin nie, jy kan 'n verskeidenheid van goed al doen.
Yes.
Catherine sê, St. Catherine's, Estelle wil graag boeke bestel.
Ek het hom gekopie en gepaste en ek sal vir u stel kontak. Ook oor die skrif, net so laaste ter afsluiting. So waarna ons ook gekyk het is, ek het vir julle gesê, method to our madness. So in I'm beginning to read, my proefkopie is nog nie geknip nie, maar is daar woordbou aktiwiteite. Maar omdat die oorhoof se uitkomste is to put letters together to build words, we're not diluting the main outcome by expecting kids to write and build words. So at the back of the book, we've provided them with the letters that they can cut out to build their words. So we tried to focus on very specific skills and outcomes as well, so that we don't, or a child doesn't exert energy on writing when the outcome is not letter formation, when the outcome is building words or putting sounds together.
I just want to add on to that from an occupational therapist point of view. If we look at a child's development and in a certain time frame of a child's life, we spend time on the things that they are developmentally ready for, learning will take place. If they're not ready for that, you're going to spend hours and hours on trying to teach the child something that they're not ready for. And that is time that you could have actually spent teaching them something else. So that's why, for me, in grade R, there are certain important skills. If you spend time on those skills, they will be so much further along in grade 1. I often see it with our initial assessments in the beginning of grade 1. You'll get a child that can read, and the other children only knows their letter sounds. But by June, the children who only knew their letter sounds can read so much better than the other child, because he can only read, but their handwriting is a problem, letter formation is a problem, auditory skills is a problem. And those are skills that should actually develop in the year that before they go to school. So it's just an important thing. Faster is not necessarily better, but if you spend time on a developmentally appropriate activities, you'll build a solid foundation that your child needs to progress in future. So for me, that's quite an important thing. And I see there's a little man in the background. Hello.
My kids are hungry.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah. He's our tester, our product tester. He's done a lot of testing for us.
Yes, now he's going to be shy. This is Luca. Luca is 5.5, and Luca has worked through all the Tippie Does Sounds books to help us to see what we need to fix, what we need to change.
Yeah, I think Luca is such an amazing reader. He's starting now with Salman Rushdie and Andre P. Brink. So you see this is working. If there's no more questions, I think we can call this one a day. Remember, you can go and have a look on the LAPA website. You can go and have a look on the Curious Readers website. Mail gerus vir Tedery of vir hy net met enige vrae of vir ons. En gaan bestel sommer vooraf julle boeke. So hoop julle het 'n lekker middag. Lekker eet, Luca.
Dankie julle, mooi bly.